Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Hokum, and I'm the Director of Social Services for the Entertainment Community Fund, formerly the Actors Fund. I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are so glad that you could be with us. We want to say a huge thank you to our presenters, Michelle Leva and Mark Landsman, as well as a shout out and thank you to the unions, guilds, associations, and not-for-profits and organizations in the entertainment community who are joining us to sponsor these webinars for the community. The Entertainment Community Fund's role is to help everybody who works professionally in performing arts and entertainment across the country. We always want to take the opportunity to invite you to get familiar with everything that we do and offer to support you in your career and life. As each of you continue down the road of recovery after the wildfires, we are here to walk with you and we're here to help. Facilitating our conversation today is Chris Smith from the Entertainment Community Fund. So let's get going. Welcome, Chris.
Everyone, as Tina said, my name is Chris Smith, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the director of the Entertainment Community Fund's Looking Ahead program, which supports the mental health and wellness of professional child actors across the country. We're so glad you could join us for today's webinar, 11 months later, Emotional Recovery After a Disaster. I will be facilitating our conversation with our two speakers, Michelle Leva, a licensed marriage and family therapist, who is a clinical director at the Palisades Community Renewal Center, and Mark Landsman, a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. The last 11 months have brought significant challenges for all the reasons we know. Today, our intention is to bring this conversation into the space to the issues of loss, grief, transition, and how we go about trying to live with all that has transpired. Before we get into our content today, I'm going to briefly describe how we will be using our webinar space. On the bottom toolbar of your screen, you will see that we have closed captioning as an option. To utilize this feature, you will need to click the closed caption option, which you may do so now. Also on the bottom of the screen, you'll see the chat icon. You can click on that icon to see the chat bar come up alongside your screen. Today, we'll only be using the chat feature to share resources such as links and PDFs. You can see our agenda is posted. Please know that you can cut and paste information from the chat into a Word document, notes, or email that you can send yourself later. Following today's session, we'll be sending everyone the information we placed in the chat in a follow-up email. And so don't worry if you don't catch something. You can submit questions by clicking on the Q&A icon, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to submit an anonymous question, it is recommended to click the icon and click Anonymous first before you begin to type, or you may inadvertently submit a question with your name appearing. We will curate questions as they come in, and we will make every effort to answer each question, but might have to limit the number of questions for each section to get through all of the material. If you really like a question that someone else has sent, please feel free to upvote that question by using the reaction button and giving it a thumbs up. This will help us curate what to answer first. You can see the agenda listed in the chat. Our format today will be to cover and to review a section of content, then open up for questions related to that section only. We will then move on to the next section. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on our Entertainment Community Fund website and client portal. We will share more information in the follow-up email. If you do not have a portal account, we invite you to create one so that you can take advantage of all the services offered through our many programs here at the Fund. Before we welcome Michelle, we wanted to emphasize a few resources. Next week, Wednesday, December 10th, we are offering our next webinar, Navigating Recovery, Building Your Property Loss Inventory. So if you need support around getting started, completing or having questions on how to move forward with this task, please join us. We are partnering with Operation Hope. Please see the link in the chat. Also, Operation Hope offers free individual-specific disaster case management support. If you have questions, concerns, or need support, go onto their website to create a portal account and request an appointment. Next week, Tuesday, December 9th, Music Cares is hosting a disaster relief wellness clinic for music professionals. The event is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Altadena and is open for musicians in both the Altadena and Palisades areas. The registration link is now in the chat. Check it out for more information. United Policyholders is offering a webinar on December 18th at 5 p.m. on wildfire smoke damage and your insurance rights. This is to receive support if you were impacted with a partial loss or your home is still standing, but you received significant damage. Additionally, here at the Entertainment Community Fund, we continue to offer our weekly drop-in gathering space, Recovering Together, which meets every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 1:15. This group is for those who've lost a home or whose residents suffered significant damage. We also continue to offer a 4-week group called Putting the Pieces Together, which is a space to come together and receive support around the feelings of loss, grief, and transition. If you need help, we really hope you reach out. And now I'd like to welcome in our first guest, Michelle Leva. Michelle is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the clinical director of the Palisades Community Renewal Center. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. I am Michelle Leva, licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical director at the Palisades Community Renewal Center. The Renewal Center is a community space where we are offering both counseling services and art services. The counseling services are through Maple Counseling. So we're offering 12 free sessions to anyone who has been impacted by the Palisades fire. And we see children, families, individual adults. We also have some groups running. So please reach out for support. The contact info will be in the chat. And Maple's main clinic also does have a grant to provide sessions to Eaton fire victims. So they are offering 6 free sessions at the main Maple clinic. And so there will be also information about how to access those resources. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk to you about, how you all might be feeling 11 months after the fires.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. So, kind of as we talked about over the last year, everyone has been stretched in ways probably never thought imaginable, from having to flee in the middle of the night to locating new residences to navigating the intricacies of smoke remediation. We know that there is a lot here and there's been a lot of loss. And I'd like to step into this conversation by just asking you about the concept of loss. And more specifically, what are some of the physical and emotional challenges that can occur as a result of a traumatic event or loss?
Yes. So a fire is most certainly a traumatic loss, and those kinds of losses affect body, mind, and identity. So in terms of body, it goes right into survival mode. So you might be feeling disrupted sleep, headaches, tension in the body. In terms of your mindset, you might notice that you're a little bit foggier than usual. Perhaps you're ruminating, you're having difficulty concentrating. And identity, your sense of self suffers. So you lose your routines, connection to places and belongings that once felt really close to you. So traumatic loss really affects the whole system. And when loss is sudden and life-altering, like it is when one experiences a fire, the nervous system has to activate right away. And so the brain doesn't have time to make sense of what's happening. And so this is why people experience sleep disruption, panic, irritability, always feeling on edge, having difficulty concentrating, and just feeling overloaded with their emotions. These fires aren't just about losing belongings or a home. They also impact your sense of identity, routine, safety, roles in your life, your sense of community, and the future that, you thought you might have been moving towards. So when that happens, the brain enters a protective kind of shutdown mode around things that, once mattered. So it's an effort to protect you from really feeling all of the emotions that might be coming up, because the idea of, attaching to new things might just feel way too overwhelming for the body.
Michelle, I so appreciate that you mentioned the brain, and that was something that I particularly stuck with,
Mm-hmm.
thinking I love that you spoke about the impacts of the brain, because what came up for me is that it's not our faults if we are having all of these circumstances go on. Our brain is actually responding to this.
Correct. And it's responding correctly, right? And we might feel like, oh gosh, why is this so difficult for me? But it's actually your nervous system doing a really good job at its job, which is to protect you. So it can feel frustrating, but it is something that changes over time.
Great point. Great point. And it kind of staying with that theme of like our brain changing, will our brain change back? Or how does that work?
So, just like any other life event, this is going to stick with you because it's part of your story now, right? But that doesn't mean that you're going to feel the way that you feel now forever. But again, 11 months in is not a very long time when we're talking about the effects of traumatic loss on the emotional system, on your nervous system. And so, if you're feeling right now like, wow, things are still really hard, I want you to know that that's extremely normal. And again, it's your brain's way of protecting you from all of that pain and difficulty. So it will change over time. And I'll be talking about how to implement little strategies along the way so that you can start to feel a little bit more like yourself. But this is a very normal process that takes time and doesn't look the same for everyone.
There's so many things there. I love that. So many things. One of the things that you touched on that I want to go back to is the sense of this change and this connection to ourselves and connection to stuff. Like for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us having to flee, or we've had our things completely destroyed. I've heard some people share that they have a different connection to stuff. So can you
Mm-hmm.
speak to that, please?
Yes, absolutely. So, again, when you experience a traumatic loss and things that were meaningful to you are now gone, your brain doesn't want to allow you to easily attach to new things because it's trying to prevent you from experiencing another loss, right? So that doesn't that doesn't go on forever, and your connection to your environment and your things does return, but for many people it becomes more intentional, right? So it's not, I'm just going to go get this thing and feel like it's mine. It's, a reclaiming of things, of routines, of community in a way that feels really intentional and safe for your system that has experienced this loss and, doesn't want you to experience that same pain again.
Mm, yeah. Routines, community, safety. Those are
Mm-hmm.
three big themes that come up to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
I want to shift a bit and talk about, maybe you can help us with some terms, like help us understand more about what grief is and what PTSD is, and maybe what are the differences.
Sure. So, grief is a normal response to a traumatic loss, like living through a wildfire. It's not a pathology. It's not something wrong with you. So, if you are in the throes of grief, thinking, what's happening to me, just know that it's so normal and a necessary response in order to be able to move through those emotions and move forward. What's hard about grief is that it's not a linear process and it comes in waves and it shifts day to day. So one day you might feel like you're doing better and the next day feels really difficult and heavy. And so it's important that you're able to acknowledge that that is a normal process. And what grief really is the process of integrating the reality of what happened to you, right? And that again takes time because you have to go little by little. If you were to acknowledge all of the loss and all of the emotions, that would be too much to handle at one time, right? So you kind of have to chip away at it little by little. And often this includes, feelings of longing, of meaning making, of your new reality and identity shifts that can feel really frustrating, but are part of the grief process. And in terms of how PTSD looks different than grief, PTSD is not just simply being sad or overwhelmed or struggling to adjust following an event like a wildfire. It doesn't mean that you're weak and it doesn't mean that you're broken, but it is a trauma response that really becomes stuck in survival mode. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that survival mode means and kind of how to start to move out of it. But those with PTSD really have intrusive memories. They're avoiding things, places, people that remind them of the experience. They have hypervigilance. So, if a book were to drop next to you, you might have a startle response. Often people experience, chronic nightmares and emotional numbing. They just don't feel much. So PTSD is not a failure to cope with what's happened to you. It's the nervous system having a little bit more difficulty returning to that baseline without proper support and help. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. That was a great definition, great explanation. And going back to something that you said, use the word longing, and that really stood out to me. I think it could be very easy to have this longing for the previous life that we had before this event. Can you
Absolutely.
speak about that, please? Because I think that longing piece is so powerful as it connects to grief.
Yeah, it's so normal and expected to want to have what you once did, right? Especially because no one chose to be in the situation, right? No one chooses to be the victim of a traumatic event. And so often longing is the brain's way of making sense of like, these things that were mine aren't mine anymore, right? These routines that were mine aren't mine. And little by little, if you can reconnect to routine, to community, to predictability, it's not that that sense of longing will disappear, but you will start to reconnect with how that looks now, right? What those routines look like now. And that is likely to look different from how they once did. But it's about connection to something new. And, that can be really difficult because, again, there wasn't a sense of agency or choice in having those, old routines kind of taken away from you. But there is a sense of agency in choosing, okay, how do I want to do this now? Right? What version of me am I finding now? And so that can actually make people feel really empowered to make those choices within a circumstance where they didn't have a ton of choice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I go into this next question for you, Michelle, I'd love to invite people to put questions into the Q&A if you have not already done so. Um, Michelle, can you share a bit about what are some of the presentations that you see people showing up to PCRC with?
Yeah. So, I mean, generally, broadly, people are just grieving, right? People are in the process of perhaps rebuilding. So there's a lot going on for them. And, right after the fires happened, people had a lot to do in terms of logistics, right? Working with insurance, figuring out how they were going to get clothes, just very kind of basic needs. And so that took a lot of planning, work. And people kind of, while that was difficult for a lot of folks, they also identified that being busy was helpful, right? And so now, almost a year later, people are really kind of feeling the emotional piece of it, where being busy was almost a distraction. And it, was often very helpful for people, but it was the body's way of going, okay, feeling the emotions isn't actually going to be safe right now. So we're going to keep this body moving, figure all of these things out. And now that there's a little bit more time, perhaps, that's when the emotional processing is really starting to happen. So people are now going, oh gosh, it's almost a year later, but I'm feeling worse, or I'm feeling still really challenged by what happened. And that's totally normal because they're actually starting to experience, the full presentation of that emotional experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I'm taking from that is like your brain was not able to handle the whole cascade of all of this at once. It's
Right.
okay, doing the FEMA stuff and all of this, the t practical stuff, and now here's the emotional piece.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That brings up an interesting point about sense of safety in the world and with a wildfire or any disaster or trauma that can
Yeah,
really create a sense of feeling unsafe in the world. And I've heard people
absolutely.
talk about the rain, following rain has exacerbated that feeling of lack of safety. Can you speak about how people might navigate that feeling of lack of safety in the world?
Absolutely. So first, I want to provide some context as to why that feeling might be coming up. And it goes back to what happens in your nervous system when you experience a disaster event like the fires. So trauma narrows what we might call our window of tolerance. So that's the zone where we feel resilient, can think clearly, we can take action, and we feel regulated. We feel good, we feel even keeled. And so after a trauma, people get knocked out of their window of tolerance, right? And especially with an unpredictable loss like this one, where it happened with no warning, that immediately sends the nervous system into a different state. And so people might be experiencing hyper arousal where they kind of get knocked upwards. And so we call that typically fight or flight. So that might create anxiety, irritability, panic, restlessness, insomnia, things like that. Or on the other end, you might be in hypo arousal, so kind of freeze or shut down, which might feel like numbness, feeling exhausted, feeling detached from things. And that's totally normal, both ends of that range. And so people respond differently because people have different trauma histories, right? They have different baselines for how their nervous system is wired, different support systems and coping strategies, different biological things like age, how your overall functioning is. And so for many people, because the nervous system got kicked out of that window of tolerance, people realize, oh, safety is not guaranteed, right? Or the nervous system really sent a signal, safety is not guaranteed. Look how quickly it can go into being in a really unsafe situation. So, you know, what you're feeling is not actually a reflection of the world being unsafe. It's a reflection of the body still recovering from being really overwhelmed by what happened. And safety is going to be rebuilt through small, repeated experiences, right? So, having routines, having grounding techniques for yourself, connecting with your world, whether that's your community, friends, partners, pets, right? Little things consistently that you can start to feel a sense of safety around, because again, it's just your nervous system reacclimating to, being able to say, we're okay, right? That's what happened, but now we're okay.
Yeah. And again, I so really appreciate what you're talking about recovery. This is a recovery, and any recovery has phases to it. And it's not that you break your leg and the next day you're out able to walk. This
Right.
is people suffered a traumatic experience, and this will be a long process. And I also really appreciate, Michelle, how you're talking about like the small things. And something that was sparking for me was how do we get still in the small? Maybe you play with your dog, maybe you go for a walk. How do you
Mhm.
do small things to develop routines and to start to bring safety back into your life?
So I think it's first about accepting that there's no big sweeping move that we can make to get us back to what feels normal to us, right? I think a lot of the time after a loss like this, people just want to, wave the magic wand and feel like themselves again. And that's not possible, unfortunately, So I think in order to establish those small, repeatable routines, we first have to accept that that's what we need to do in order to facilitate healing, that that's really where the healing lies is in being able to connect to those small things that we do every day that just allow us a moment of stillness, allow us a moment of presence. And it doesn't mean that there aren't still moments of difficulty. Maybe most of the day feels really difficult, but you are able to carve out just these little moments where you can feel good. And that is the path to healing ultimately, so it's about
Mm.
accepting that that's how it's going to look, and that might mean that it takes time, and that's okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think with that too, like something that I'm taking from what you're saying is to have compassion for ourselves and to not be frustrated with ourselves that, okay, I feel this way and I think I should feel this way.
Totally. Absolutely. There's no one way to grieve, right? Or to
Mhm.
heal. And that's going to look different for everyone. So, you know, what did they say? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? It doesn't make sense to look at someone else's process and to compare yourself to that, because the reality is everyone's loss in this circumstance looks different, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and regardless of that, everyone's process of healing looks different, because as I mentioned, it's based on what your capacity was before the event, right? How you were functioning, what your stress levels were, who your supports were, and so all of that really does matter in terms of how you move forward. And so it's really important not to judge that process, especially if it feels like it's taking time or it's moving slowly, bit by bit. It's about recognizing the little moments where you can shift into presence, a sense of joy, a sense of, oh, I'm doing that thing that I used to do that feels really me, right? Reconnecting back to a sense of what feels like yourself. And that is probably going to look somewhat different, but that's really where the healing lies.
So I have a couple questions that I'd love to toss to you.
Sure.
And when we talk about navigating this response, like what might you say if someone feels like they are navigating this response very differently from their partner?
Mm, mm,
Yeah, because I hear like there could be some discordance there.
absolutely. Yeah. So I would expect that, just like in many other circumstances, right? We have a different perspective or a different emotional experience than our partner does about whatever it might be. And so I think I've worked extensively with couples in my career. And, one thing that I always tried to impart was a sense of wanting to learn the other person's perspective rather than try to arrive at a right way of doing something, right? There's no right way. There's no my way of doing it is correct and your way is wrong. It's this is how it's happening for me and this is how it's happening for you. And what can I do to support myself and to support my partner, right? So having a really open and honest conversation where it's not about comparison or doing better than the other person or doing worse than the other person. It's an understanding, right? It's a conversation to try to understand what they're experiencing and how you can help each other, because ultimately leaning on supports and not feeling like you have to go through your healing process alone is really crucial in order to actually be able to move forward. It's not something that you can do on your own.
Yeah. What I hear from that too is a sense of curiosity. You may be
Absolutely.
connected with someone, but I'm trying to remain curious about you and your experience of this. And then the last thing you said, that regardless of how we're both dealing with this, we're coming together and trying to come together as a unit to tackle this problem.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Healing very rarely happens in isolated spaces.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Let me share another question. For those of us that are still displaced or are on the move since the fires, do you have recommendations to establish small safety steps? So
Mm,
one, so I'll stop there. There's a second
sure.
part to the question.
We go ahead. So, because maybe they're related.
Okay. Okay. Is it possible to heal from PTSD or complex PTSD while still traveling this way? Or would that set us back because there's too much unpredictability?
Wow. That's a great
Mhm.
question.
Great question.
So, I mean, I want to start by saying again that feeling symptoms of PTSD after an event like this is really normal. And you might be right that because things are still changing, that makes it difficult to feel rooted and grounded and settled, which we might associate with, once I feel grounded and rooted and settled, then I can start my healing process. And that might be true. That might facilitate a greater sense of healing, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it while you're still navigating these transitions and these changes. And so, in terms of establishing small routines when you're still feeling displaced and not in your environment, you know, what were you doing before that brought you a sense of joy? Maybe it wasn't going to a particular place, but maybe it was, sitting and reading for 5 minutes before bed. Maybe it was having a long hug with your partner when they came home from work. Again, if you have pets, pets are amazing resources for us as humans. So I think part of establishing a routine is the acceptance that it's not going to look exactly like it did, but it can still facilitate the same yummy, good feelings that we had about what we were doing before. It's just in a new way. And so being okay with it looking different, and reestablishing as much of it as you can is really helpful because it makes it feel like we're us again, right? Anything that you can do that makes you feel like you. So maybe that's cooking a really good meal, right? Maybe it's listening to music. I think we can all try to identify those things that feel really unique to our identity that were not taken away because of what happened, right? And so it's really easy to hyper focus on what has changed and what was taken. But there are things intrinsic to us that still remain. And so being able to reconnect with those parts is really important in terms of trying to reestablish a routine and a sense of connection to yourself.
Great. That's great. Michelle, I was thinking, like, I think that would be a great exercise for people to look at, to think of, okay, yes, the fire took this, but what remains? What
Yeah,
of me remains that did not go up in the fire that I can hold on to?
absolutely.
Um, Another question that I'd like to toss your way, can you give some examples of grounding techniques besides the sitting, putting your feet on the ground and breathing?
So I'm going to toss that to the future because Mark is going to be talking all about that. I mean, I will give you one that I think is really accessible, and that's doing just a simple breathing exercise where you inhale for 4, you hold it for 2, and exhale for 6. And we want we always if you forget everything about breathing, just remember that exhaling is really what activates the parasympathetic nervous system, what calms us down. So you always want your exhale to be longer than your inhale. So if you can even just sit in a chair, on the floor, whatever, for 1 minute and practice that inhale, hold, slow exhale, that is just signaling to your body that right here, right now, I'm safe. And that's always accessible to you, right? We're always breathing anyways. So being a little bit more intentional with how that happens is a wonderful resource and anyone can do it.
I like that. Right here, right now, I'm
Yeah.
safe. Bringing
Yes.
it to the present.
One other thing I will say is that you can always ground yourself by using your senses. So, something that you can see, smell, taste, all of them is helpful for, again, grounding in the present. Because often when we feel dysregulated, it's because we're not really here, right? We're thinking into the future, we're ruminating about something. And so if you can ground yourself through what you're experiencing in your environment, that's also very helpful.
Great, great. I have another question, Michelle. I'm going to toss your
Yeah.
way, and this is kind of a similar theme. It says, I appreciate very much that you said that every healing journey is different. Can you give examples of parts of the healing process that most people experience and
Mm.
some that you have seen that are more unusual?
Interesting question.
It is an interesting question. Yeah.
That are more unusual. So, I mean, I don't know if this is a cop out to the question, but I really don't think any healing process is unusual because we just have to accept that it's going to look different for people. And what I would say is universal is that it's really hard, right? And that it's unpredictable. And that, like I said, certain days are good, right? You might feel like, okay, today I feel empowered and I feel strong and I slept well. And, I feel really connected to my work or my partner or whatever, and I think that it's important to not get too attached to that state as much as it's important not to get too attached to the days that are really hard, right? Because if you take an inventory, it's really easy on the days that feel tough to go, oh, why do I keep feeling this way? But if you thought back to the last 7 days, you might go, oh yeah, but all of these great things did happen, right? And so it's important to really take an inventory of what is going well, what is going right. And again, maybe the hard things outweigh those good things, 10 to 1, but it's still something good, right? And just knowing that that is possible is and remembering that is a necessary part of the healing process. So it's acknowledging the good days, the bad days, and not holding too tightly to either experience because it's bound to change.
Absolutely. And I take from that too. I really appreciate what you said about the unusual ways of healing. Like, I
Mhm.
would not want anybody to, chastise themselves for the ways that they are navigating or not navigating this, but to just really have grace for themselves for wherever you are at in this process.
Absolutely. And I want to acknowledge that that is going to feel crappy, sometimes,
Mhm. Yeah,
right? We're going to feel differently than we want to feel. And that's hard, right? That's really difficult. And so just being able to honor that, right? Like today feels crappy and I don't want to feel crappy anymore, That's okay to say to yourself, right? That's real and honest. And so just be able to hold that for yourself, that it's okay to not want to feel the way that you feel. And the more that you can ground and reconnect to what you are doing that is good, that's the way forward. Right. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. As we talked about grounding, I think some of the things that get in the way of that are kind of our mental state and some things like irritability or racing thoughts, which can then lead to like insomnia. Can you
Yeah.
speak to like how might we navigate when our brain just won't turn off?
Right. So, I mean, I've dealt with insomnia before. I get it's so difficult. And it's one of those things that, the more it happens, the more it happens. It kind of begets itself. Racing thoughts, tend to form more racing thoughts. And it's, I would say two things. First of all, our brains are uh we inform our brains how to work, right? So the more we think about something, the more our brain says, oh, that's a really important thing to think about. I better think about that some more. So all of the thoughts, we have tens of thousands of thoughts every day, but most of them look the same yesterday and tomorrow that as they do today. And so our brain is really just a machine and you're giving it input and it creates an output, right? So it's important to remember that we have agency over those racing thoughts, that rumination. Yes, it's kind of a process that's happening automatically, but we can influence the input so that the output can change over time, right? So that's just one thing that's helpful to know about yourselves is that there is capacity for changing that. For me and for my clients, having a routine, if we're talking about insomnia specifically, having a pre-bedtime routine, I know people talk about this a lot, but it's so important, right? So if you think about what insomnia is, it's again your body not feeling safe to relax, right? It's on alert. And so what that means is that we want to be doing things that signal to our nervous system you can calm down, you can get ready for rest, right? And so that might be a bath, that might be a short walk in the evening. That might mean, putting your phone away, not watching TV, an hour before you go to bed. It might be listening to a meditation or some soothing sound, right? Making your sleep environment feel really nice to you, managing any chaos that might exist, right? Like I know for me, if I'm going to sleep in a room that has a bunch of laundry everywhere, like I don't feel relaxed. So those little things, does my environment feel relaxing? Can I do something for my body? Maybe that's some like light stretching. Again, maybe it's a bath, a shower. Hot water activates the parasympathetic nervous system to be able to calm down and show the nervous system that it's okay. So if you're someone who's doing, ice baths all the time, but you're finding that you're feeling really anxious, it might be worth noting that, cold activates our, alertness. And so to try to do things that feel really good to you before bed, it's not nothing. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Michelle, something I'm really taking from everything you're saying is like there's a foundation of compassion. Like whether
Yeah.
it's the grounding, whether it's the baths, like whether it's the insomnia, like I'm taking it's like just a sense of compassion that you're giving out to everybody. How important
Yeah.
is compassion in this?
It's so important because, we're all we got, right? We're one body, one mind, and we have to live with ourselves every day, right? So wouldn't you want to be giving yourself love and compassion for what you're experiencing, right? I mean, the alternative is if you're judging yourself, right? Judgment, guilt, shame, those things keep us stuck where we are, right? They are not great at helping us to change or take different action. And so when we are in a compassionate zone with ourselves, our capacity for change, for resiliency widens, right? Compassion is certainly something that widens your window of tolerance, right? So that your nervous system feels safe again. So compassion to me is the only choice that you have, even on days when it feels really difficult or you're regretful or you're thinking, gosh, I didn't do what I should have done today, or I said I was going to do this thing and I didn't. Recognizing that our choices are most often defined by where we are in our nervous systems and how much capacity we have to do those things and make those choices. So the more you can be okay with that and go, that was my capacity for today. And maybe tomorrow will look different. That only serves to widen that window over time.
I love that. I love that. I especially love that too, because I think it's so easy to be at the sense of like, I have not done enough. I have
Yes.
not done enough, or I have a list of 50 things to do, and I have not done any of them. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a common thing here. And I think that compassion piece is so powerful. And like, I definitely don't want anybody to beat themselves up. And it sounds like you're not wanting anybody to beat themselves up for where they are in the process.
No, absolutely not. And again, it's a normal response that your brain is having to the traumatic event that you've experienced to feel like your capacity is less to get things done, to remember things, to focus on things. And so, what's helped my clients is like pick one or two things that are the most important for today, right? Instead of having a running to-do list of 50 things that is immediately overwhelming to you when you look at it, pick a couple of things that are really important for today and see how that goes, right? And again, it's your brain likes when it can do what you've told it to do, right? So when it achieves those two things, it's like, okay, that felt good. Maybe in a couple of days, I can add one more thing to that, right? And little by little, you're just increasing your capacity, but don't rush that process, right? That takes time. So be gentle with
Absolutely.
yourself about it.
Build up, build up.
Exactly.
Michelle,
Exactly.
we're almost at the end of our time with you, but I have another question that I'd love to toss your way. And
Sure.
that's how can loved ones better support those who have experienced this type of loss?
Great question. So I think what I've heard from my clients most is that it's really hard for them to have to rehash everything that's happened, right? People are being really well intentioned by going and saying, oh gosh, how's the rebuilding going? Or have you done this or have you done that? And tell me about what it was like when the fire happened, because they're curious, right? It's a normal human response. But for a lot of folks, it's really difficult to continue talking about those things. And so supporting your loved ones or people that you know in your community who have experienced a loss, ask them how they're doing, right? Let them invite you into what they want to share about their experience rather than you leading that and assuming that they are going to want to share certain aspects of it, right? Let them drive that. So if that is just, hey, how are you? Is there anything I can help you with? Or even dropping off food unexpectedly, like doing something that they didn't even ask for is also very helpful, right? Because the mental load that accompanies something like this is so great that even asking how are you or what can I do to help might just be another thing that goes on the to-do list, right? And so if you can think of small ways to just show your support for that person that don't require their input, that's always such a lovely thing to do. And again, much like what we were talking about earlier, lead with curiosity rather than saying, oh, that must feel so hard for you. Just ask them how their experience of it is and validate that.
That's so powerful. There is no one recipe to support people, but I love that asking how we're doing. And it makes me think of how people drop off pasta or lasagna after
Exactly.
somebody passes away,
Exactly.
just to show I'm thinking about you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Michelle, I have another question here. I feel
All
like
right.
more questions keep coming in. How
Great.
can someone break through the feelings that they don't have a home anymore? They are struggling to connecting with anyone. Yeah. How do they navigate that?
So again, that struggling to attach, first of all, having things ripped away is such an unfair process, right? And so there are those feelings about it. And that creates difficulty in feeling like what you do have now is really yours, right? And has meaning. For a lot of people, they've had to go out and just buy clothes, really quickly, not necessarily choosing things that feel like them. And so they're like, when I get dressed in the morning, I don't really feel like myself, those kinds of choices. And so I think it's really important to remember again that attaching to new things, to new places, people, community, whatever it is, identity
Mhm.
takes time because your nervous system doesn't want to do that quickly because it's protecting you from experiencing a new loss, right? Well, if I
Mhm.
attach to this thing, what happens if I lose it? I'm going to be in pain all over again. And so that just means that it's going to happen little by little, right? That sense of connection to new things happens in very small pieces. And so again, maybe maybe you lost something, a coffee mug that you really loved and you use every day, right? Maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to get a new mug because that's something I really loved, right? Little things step by step where you can attach yourself, but remembering that if it's really hard to do that right now, it might just be your body signaling to you that it again still doesn't feel safe enough to do that, and acknowledging that that will get better with time as your capacity increases. It's not fixed.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. It's like I'm hearing like really just be connected with your body more
Yeah.
and to accept the sadness of it. Like to accept that like this was a very difficult thing. This is where my body is. And like some days I'm gonna feel like this, some days I'm not gonna feel like this. And like if I don't feel tethered to anything, that's okay. And then what I also heard in there, the sense of hope. Like
Yes,
have hope that you will be tethered to things and in another point.
absolutely. Because it will happen. It just takes time.
Yeah, yeah. Michelle, I do want to shift the conversation a bit to the topic of suicide because I know for some folks that some folks may have had thoughts of suicide due to the enormity of the overwhelm. Can you speak
Absolutely.
to that, please?
Yeah. So often suicidal thoughts are coming up for people when their pain is exceeding their coping capacity, right?
Mm,
So it's not really a desire to die, it's a desire for relief, right?
mm,
So you can normalize that feeling for yourself without minimizing it and saying, you actually don't want to not be here. You just feel exhausted and you need support, right? So,
Mhm.
not minimizing that for some people, they do have active suicidality, an intention, and there are resources for that, certainly. But for most people, after an event like this, it's just a seeking of relief, right? We feel so exhausted emotionally, mentally. And so seeking support, whether that's through therapy, whether that's through support groups, whether that's through community, social supports, family, there are so many ways to access that. But remembering that it's just an overload of what you're feeling, pain, emotion, that's just beyond your current capacity to deal with it. And so recognizing that your capacity can increase if you seek support is really normalizing, but helps you to kind of recontextualize why you might be having those thoughts.
Absolutely. That context is super important. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yep.
And then one final question that I'll ask you for a couple takeaways. And
Okay.
how does one find hope? Or what is hope, rather?
So hope it's not a feeling, it's done through action, right? So again, it's not just waiting for hope to arise, without any input. It's making choices day to day that instill a sense of hope and moving forward. So again, that might be those small little routines that you are consistently doing that you start to feel really good about, and that you can lean on to feel a sense of normalcy about your life. And so hope is a process of action. It's not just something that shows up magically because it's, a year later or 2 years later. It's something that you're constantly curating for yourself. I hope that makes
Absolutely. So don't sit there and wait back for hope to come,
sense.
but go create hope.
Go create hope. Absolutely.
Yeah. Michelle, as we're nearing the end of our time with you, I'd like to invite you to share maybe one or two final takeaways with our group.
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, I just want to say again that what you're feeling is normal, right? There is no quote unquote normal way to respond to traumatic loss. And so, whatever that looks like for you is normal. You're not behind. You're not doing it worse than or better than anyone else. It's just where you are, and having compassion for that is key. The second thing I want to say is that healing is possible. Your nervous system, that window of tolerance that I talked about, can widen, and it will over time. And Mark is going to help talk about how you can facilitate that for yourself. But often the healing process is not done in isolation, right? Like I said before, enrolling other people in that process for yourself is going to be super important. So lean on the people that love you and care about you. Seek support externally if that looks like, seeing a therapist, seeing a psychiatrist, whatever it might look like. Do that. It's not something that you're likely to get very far with, just trying to, rough it and charge through by yourself.
Great points. Great points. Michelle, I want to thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us.
My
Again,
pleasure.
absolutely. Again, to all of our participants, we'll be sending out information on the Palisades Community Research Renewal Center and other mental health resources, including groups offered here at the Entertainment Community Fund. And I want to also invite those listening to still feel free to place your questions into the Q&A section. So, Michelle, with that, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.
And as we close now, I'd love to introduce our next guest, Mark Landsman. Mark is a certified professional mindfulness teacher based here in Los Angeles, who's going to introduce us to some practical tools that can be quite useful in helping to manage and ease some of the negative effects of stress, fear, anxiety, and overwhelm on our nervous system when we're experiencing emotional dysregulation. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Entertainment Community Fund for inviting me here. As Michelle so wisely just shared, hope is a process of action. Hope is actionable. So let's just take an action here in this moment. Let's just take this moment here and see if you can allow yourself to feel your body sitting here in the chair that you're sitting on or wherever you are. See if you can connect to the floor below your feet. And just simply invite your mind here to just take a break for a minute. The mind has been really activated, really busy, absorbing all this incredibly invaluable information. But we're just going to allow the mind and the body to arrive here and settle here in the present moment. And I just encourage you to take some nice, nourishing breaths. And I would really like to invite everyone on the call to take a moment and thank yourself for bringing yourself here today. To acknowledge that right now, in this moment, you are engaged in an action of deep self-care. This is for you, and you brought yourself to this moment. Your agency brought you here. And for some people, it can be very helpful to place a hand over your heart area. And if it's comfortable, to maybe allow your eyes to close. And just in this moment, know that you're caring for your inner well-being. And see if you can take a nice, easy inhalation right into the chest area here. See if you can just allow that chest area, the heart center, just allow it to expand on the inhale and easily drop with the exhale. Do that a few times. Just nice, easy breath into the chest area with your hand on your chest and exhale. All right. Okay. So my name is Mark Landsman, and I'm a certified mindfulness teacher based here in Los Angeles. And I've also been a filmmaker in the industry for better half of a quarter of a century, a long time. And you may be thinking, well, clearly the filmmaking didn't work out for this guy. Otherwise, why would he be doing this? But that's not the case, thankfully. And the reason why I'm here with you today and why I trained to teach mindfulness in particular professionally is that I experienced through my own inner struggles with dysregulation the importance of having some effective and practical inner tools to help navigate the inevitable challenges, uncertainties, and of course, as all of you so well know on this call, the utter unpredictability of life. And as Michelle so wisely just shared, leaning into these strategies to cultivate some states of calm, clarity, and balance, and real compassion for ourselves and others right now, right in the here and now, right in this moment. So in other words, to find some tools to help us regulate when the nervous system feels like a plane in turbulence, and just be able to use some simple, accessible tools to help level the plane and land it. So in the brief time that we have here today, we're just going to explore a few of these basic mindfulness tools to help do that very thing. And first, just a little bit of housekeeping. This session is fully inclusive of all backgrounds, identifications, orientations, physical abilities, mental abilities, and all levels of experience with meditation, including total beginners. The most important thing is that you are your own advocate. Please only do what feels comfortable for you and your body, and there is no right way to do this. You are always your own advocate. So what exactly is mindfulness meditation? I'm going to start with the second word, which is meditation, and share a definition from a really wonderful author and teacher that some of you may know named Pema Chodron, who says that meditation practice is not about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It's about befriending who we already are, whoever we are right now, just as we are. And that's why we come to know, and that's what we come to know with tremendous curiosity and interest. Curiosity and interest, really looking at our own experience with compassion for it, really having compassion. The other great definition now of mindfulness comes from another phenomenal teacher named Tara Brach, and she likes to use the image of a great bird. And so one wing of the bird is the wing of present moment awareness. You are aware of what's happening in your body through your senses in the present moment. And you're paying a careful attention to it without interfering, judging, criticizing, denying whatever's going on. So the wing of awareness is the first wing of this bird. The second wing of the bird, as Chris and Michelle have been talking about, is the wing of compassion. How am I relating to whatever is happening in my present moment experience? And can I bring compassion? Can I bring loving kindness to myself with whatever's happening? So if that's the definition, why do it? Why meditate? Why mindfulness? And I'm going to lean into some extensive research in neuroscience that tells us, as Michelle mentioned, that our brain has neuroplasticity. In other words, we have the ability to quite literally create and strengthen new neural pathways in our system that open up new ways of responding to whatever's happening with more calm, clarity, and a sense of our own agency. It doesn't mean that we always have to like what's happening. We're just introducing the notion that we don't have to get caught in the current of it. We can cultivate some distance in our nervous system and be able to kind of determine what is skillful here, what is self-nourishing here, what is going to create less suffering for myself and others in this moment. And so many of you are likely saying, well, that sounds really great, but how in the world do I begin to do that? And so I'm going to share a few tools with you, and we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. But the first one is about arriving in the present moment. And so we're just going to begin that process. So I can't see you, but I can feel you. So we're just going to begin to arrive right here. So if it's comfortable, and only if it's comfortable, just allow your eyes to just gently close. For those of you who that's not comfortable for, you can just maybe sort of just allow your eyes to squint a little bit, let some light in. And we're going to turn the focus inward on our inner experience. And I know that there are some actors on this call, and so the role that you're going to be playing right now is as a curious and compassionate scientist. And the subject of your research is you. So you are investigating with curiosity and compassion your present moment experience without judgment, without interference, just objectively, what's going on. So we're going to start with the first inquiry. And the scientist wants to know, how is my body doing in this moment? What's going on in my body in this moment? What am I actually sensing here through my body right now? And so see if you can objectively, just almost as if you had a clipboard and a legal pad, and you could just make some notes like, okay, there's some tension here, or there's some itching, or my hands are cold, or I'm warm, or I'm settling. Just simple, basic, objective observations. This is how it is. It's just like this in this moment. You're really inviting arrival here. You're telling the nervous system, it's okay. I'm here. And now let's have the scientist move the inquiry to looking at the breathing. How's my breathing in this moment? Is it shallow? Is it quick? Or is it deepening? Where am I breathing? Am I breathing up here? Or am I coming down in my abdomen and breathing from a more abdominal place? Just what is happening objectively with my breathing? And now moving the inquiry into the area of your heart center. And the inquiry is, what's going on here in this moment? How is my mood. How am I feeling in this moment? Just this moment. Just like you're like a meteorologist observing the weather pattern. Okay, it's just like this right now. Noticing maybe qualitatively if you can put the mood into one of three descriptors. My mood is pleasant. My mood is unpleasant. My mood is neutral. Again, as objective as you can be. You're not trying to change the mood. It could be a horrible mood. You're just witnessing it. It's just like this. Okay. And now the scientist is moving into an observation of the mind in this moment. Just looking at the mind objectively. What's happening with my mind in this moment? And a very interesting way to do that is through a visualization. I want to invite you to imagine a snow globe. A snow globe that you during holiday times, typically there are, these snow globes that you shake, and there's sometimes a sleigh or a Santa or whatever, but this is an empty snow globe. And the snow globe represents your mind. So just see for a minute if you can see this kind of sphere, this globe, with the kind of the fluid in it, and the many thousands of tiny white flakes in there represent your thoughts. So just look at the snow globe. Just take a good look up there. Again, you're a compassionate and curious scientist. What's happening in your snow globe in this moment? What's going on with the flakes in your snow globe? Now, some of you might be having a blizzard up there. It might be just a flurry of snow going in all directions, and some of you, it might be just an utter whiteout. For others of you, you might have the flakes kind of beginning to fall towards the floor of the globe. Others of you may be noticing that your globe in this moment is clear. Again, there's no wrong, there's no right. It just simply is. Just like this, in this moment. And see if you can carefully look and see if the state of the flakes in your snow globe seem fixed, or if it's fluid and moving, if it's changing. All right. So I just want to kind of talk about thoughts for a minute, because I think that there's a popular myth that thinking is bad for meditation. But that's quite the contrary. Joseph Goldstein, who's one of the great mindfulness teachers, likes to say that it's not thinking that's the problem. It's how we're relating to our thoughts, to the content that creates suffering. And another teacher, Jack Kornfield, likes to say that the mind thinks and excretes thoughts the same way that the body excretes sweat. It's a completely natural occurrence. So we don't have to demonize our thoughts or say that somehow we're not doing something right by having them. It's natural. What we're doing here is developing the ability to just simply observe them as we would observe a phenomenon like a river or clouds, a passing show. So for those of you who are new to mindfulness, congrats, that was your first experience. And now we're going to move into 3 different tools that I hope you'll be able to put into your superhero belt for when you're feeling states of dysregulation, for when you're feeling anxiety or overwhelm or fear or exhaustion or looping or any of these experiences, that you can say, I have some tools here, and you can reach in and take one out and use it. So the first tool, and all of these tools are backed by extensive research in neuroscience, And it's a growing body of research now that shows the benefits on our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. So the first tool is mindfulness of the body. And I'm going to begin by sharing a quote again with Pema Chodron, mindfulness teacher, and she says, "It is helpful to realize that this very body that we have, that is sitting here right now, with all of its aches and its pleasures, is exactly what we need to be fully human, fully awake, and fully alive." So we're going to do a brief exercise to explore what she's talking about. And we're going to begin by simply feeling the chair that you're sitting in, quite literally experiencing the sensations of sitting in this chair. And a kind of a little hack, in a way, to do this is to look at where in your body you are feeling the force of gravity at play. So I want to call your attention to the two bones at the base of your pelvis that are called the sits bones. That's the place where you're sitting right now and connecting to the chair or the bench or cushion, whatever you're sitting on. See if you can sense where your sits bones are making contact with the seat that's holding you up right now. And really allow yourself to settle there, to allow gravity to settle. We'll move to the two femur bones, the upper leg bones. See if you might allow those to be heavy and settle with gravity. Moving down to the lower leg bones and the feet. So the entire lower body is rooting here and sinking with gravity. There's nothing you need to do, it's just happening. And you might ask yourself, where else is gravity at play on my body? What happens when you release your shoulders? And what happens when you allow the shoulder blades, which are these upside down triangles on your back, to just slide down the back and also fall with gravity? And notice what that does to your arms and your hands. Perhaps those arms and hands are heavy and just resting with ease on your lap. And now what about the belly? Can you allow gravity to do its thing on the belly and just let the belly settle here and be heavy and soft? So these are all of the areas of your body that are susceptible to gravity. And now let's look at the areas that are actually rising and suspending. So bring an awareness to your spine and see if you might experience the spine as rising up through the torso. Just an energy that's moving back and all the way up the spinal column. And at the very top of the column is your head. Just see if you might notice that your head is not fused to your spinal column, but the head is actually just floating here. So we're going to just mark this position as a seated meditation posture. We're finding our seat in meditation. There's lots of ways to do it, but for today, the one we're going to introduce is just this basic seated meditation posture. The lower body is weighted, the arms are weighted, the shoulders are dropping, the belly is soft, the torso is suspending, the spine is going back and up, just rising. The head is just floating here. You're kind of like a marionette. See if you can take some deep, nourishing breaths into this posture. And just mark for yourself, this is a posture of meditation. It's a very dignified posture. It's really grounding you here in the present moment. So that's mindfulness of the body. And I'm going through this fairly quickly because we are limited in time, but I want to get some of these just basic tools out to you. You can remind yourself that your body is in the present moment. Whenever you feel a sense of rushing thoughts or anxiety, stopping, connecting to gravity, connecting to the experience of your living body in this moment, right here and now, safe, out of harm's way, here in the present moment. And what we're doing, all of these tools speak to Michelle's point about the brain's ability to adapt and grow with patterning. They say that neurons that fire together wire together. So we're firing our neurons in a positive direction. We're strengthening. It's like going to the spiritual gym or the neurological gym. Okay, now let's move on to mindfulness of breathing. And this is so important for helping to kind of recover from trauma. So first and foremost, resuming this relaxed position, allowing your body to be as comfortable as you can, allowing the belly to be very soft here. Imagining like those Buddha bellies that you see in restaurants that you rub for good luck. Allowing the belly to be very soft and very heavy. And see if you can simply be aware that your body is breathing in this moment. Just take a moment and say hello to your breath. However you find it, you might say to yourself, I'm breathing. I'm breathing. Right in this moment, I'm breathing. Now, the breath is the most powerful anchor in any form of meditation. And the reason for that is quite simple. The only place that you are able to perceive your breathing is right here in the present moment. It's literally impossible to perceive your breath 5 years ago, 5 milliseconds into the future. The only place that's possible for you to connect to your breath in a aware and conscious way is in the here and the now. So in mindfulness meditation, we use the breath as an anchor that connects us to this present moment and holds us here safely, safely, safely. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore the physical sensation of breathing. See if you can take a breath into your nose and see if you might sense over the very sensitive tissue of your nostrils that air is entering the body. A current of air is entering the body through the nostrils, and it's leaving the body either through the nostrils or the mouth, whatever's comfortable for you. You're just beginning to be aware, oh, that's what breathing feels like. And in the process, we're slowing it down. So take a nice inhalation in and see if you can just allow the exhalation to be a little longer. See if you can do that again. You take a nice inhalation in. Maybe you hold it for 2 seconds and then allow the exhalation for 3. And maybe you take another inhalation in for 2 seconds. 1, 2. And allow the exhalation for 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time, taking a nice nourishing breath into the body for 2, and the breath exhaling for 3. All right. So we're going to do something now called the relaxation response. This is something that was discovered out of Harvard in the mid-70s by a neurobiologist who discovered that when we take deep, nourishing breaths into our abdomen, it sends a very powerful signal through the millions of neurons that are down there, up the polyvagal nerve, into the brain, right into the brain. And it gives a message that you're safe. it quite literally moves us out of fight, flight, or freeze into a greater homeostasis, a greater sense of balance, a sense that we are okay, a greater sense of calm. So we're going to try this now. If you can take the palm of your hand and just place it over your belly and just say hello to your belly. No judgment. Nobody's expecting a six-pack or a flat belly here. It's the softer, the better. And on the inhalation, see if you can press your belly outward so that you're quite literally moving the hand outward. The palm of the hand is taking a ride on the belly. So on the inhalation, the belly moves out. And on the exhalation, the belly falls. On the inhalation, the belly expands. On the exhalation, the belly falls. And for those of you who like ocean metaphors, I like to think that on the inhalation, you're kind of just a little bit out in the ocean, and then on the exhalation, you ride that wave all the way back to the beach. And the distance of that ride is different for all of us, right? So just allowing yourself to follow the exhalation all the way out the body. So you take an inhale in, the belly moves out, the hand moves out. You take an exhalation and you ride that wave all the way back to the beach. A few more times at your own pace. Breathing in, belly expands. Breathing out, the belly falls. And we're going to keep doing that, and I'm going to invite you to add a little phrase. And this phrase comes from the very wise teacher Trudy Goodman, who founded Insight LA, one of the great meditation teachers in the West. And she likes to say on the inhalation quietly to herself, this breath, only breath. And on the exhale, this moment, only moment. So on the inhalation, this breath, only breath. And on the exhalation, this moment, only moment. A few more times. This breath, it's the only breath I'm aware of. And on the exhalation, this moment, it's the only moment there is. There is no other moment than this moment. Inhale this breath, only breath. Exhalation, this moment, only moment. So this is something that scientists have discovered that even when you do it for a very brief time, you are quite literally changing your neurochemistry. You are taking your nervous system from a place of dysregulation and turbulence into level flight. And you're doing it entirely on your own, entirely of your own volition. So I am out of time here, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris. But the last thing I want to do before I do that is to just invoke a very simple compassion phrase that you can say to yourself. And that is, again, putting your hand on your heart and just saying, may I be safe and protected. May I be safe and protected. May I be peaceful. May I be peaceful. May I be of strong body, mind, and spirit. May I be free from suffering. That's a compassion practice for mindfulness. I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, and thank you.
Mark, stay here for a second. I feel a stillness in me, and I want to, like, that's the reaction that I'm feeling. Like, your voice combined with the exercise, your pacing has created a stillness in me, and I appreciate that stillness. And I actually want to invite those attendees to type in the Q&A. What are you feeling? What did you feel? What was your experience of the breathing? So, Mark, I'd also love to open it up for you to ask, combining Michelle's tools, your mindfulness tools, what is maybe one or two takeaways that you have for the group?
That's a great question, Chris. I would say for this right now, less is more. Less is more, and easy does it and simple. So really focusing on these very these are deceptively simple exercises, but the effect that they are having on the nervous system is immeasurable and invaluable. And so I would say the simplicity of the exercises, and as Michelle was alluding to, the continuity. If you can take just 5 minutes every morning before you look at your phone, before you get into fix it mode, to just simply connect to where you are at, to ground, to connect your body first, and then to greet your breath and quiet and calm the breath. Because what we have found through 2,600 years of meditation across multiple continents is that when we quiet the mind and we settle the body, there's more access to our compassion for ourselves and others. We're more able to skillfully meet the moment from a place of regulation, from a place that's level and clear. We're seeing the moment more clearly than we would be if we were up in the more dysregulated states.
Mark, what I love about this too is that this can be accessed anywhere at any time.
Yes, it's so true. And for those of us who live in Los Angeles and, find ourselves in awful traffic or getting cut off by somebody or this, that, or there's so many ways in which these are very practical, pragmatic tools. They're meant to be reliable and easy. And as you said, Chris, they can be done anywhere, waiting in a line, in your home, taking a walk out in nature. You don't have to be seated to do these meditation exercises. You can do it while you're walking around the block,
Yeah.
just following your breath.
Mark, with that, I want to thank you so much for sharing this mindfulness exercise and the tools and tips. Again, to all of our attendees, you can find all of our resources. As we come to the close of our webinar, I have a few announcements. The fund, one, thank you so much, Mark. One, the fund is still accepting applications for emergency financial assistance. You can find the application via the portal. We continue to look at hosting webinars and other information sessions to assist in the process of recovery. So if there's a topic that you think that would be helpful to explore, you're welcome to email us suggestions. We're still hosting our weekly drop-in support group on Tuesday afternoons. If you are interested, feel free to check that out on our portal. And lastly, as we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the fires, we're looking at ways to bring people together as a community to remember and honor that day. If you're interested in that, please be on the lookout for the information on our social media. Lastly, again, I want to thank Michelle Leva and Mark Landsman for sharing their wealth of information with us today, and for you all for listening. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this workshop. Know that the fund and the consortium of agencies that have come together to bring events like these to fruition are here to support you on your journey. Thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful